There we go. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you joining us today for the webinar. We have Bill Mitchell from Optiweigh and Edwina Warby from Black Box Co. who are going to present to us today. There's a little bit of context around why we've been working with Bill and Edwina. When I first joined Heritage Australia, I was very keen to get a lot more commercial carcass data in particular and work from the outcome focus of what we're delivering as a breed. Really then work from the carcass outcome back through the supply chain to have a look at how we can connect breeding decisions, getting that information all the way back to seed stock producers. And one of the interesting challenges I think we have as an industry and something that we can work on as a breed is connecting all of those different data points. As a breed society, we see a lot of performance recording. We've got a lot of genomic information, pedigree information on all those animals. And then we translate that into commercial production. I've been able to get carcass data from central Queensland down to Tasmania. Through that process, I had various data contributions come through via the Black Box platform. And it's a very user-friendly way of packaging up not only the carcass data, but lifetime performance data that can be really tailored depending on what data is available, what you want to do with it, and what you want to see. In addition to that, the work that Bill's been doing, he pioneered and invented the in-paddock weighing system, Optiweigh, and that is capturing real-time average daily gain, live weight information on animals in extensive grazing systems. And it really got me thinking about what opportunities that creates for both seed stock and commercial producers, and particularly looking at how do we get more data in real time that helps inform decisions, that enables us to make more, take advantage of market opportunities, understand what's happening in the paddock before, while the pasture might look fresh and still look like there's plenty of feed available, what's actually happening with livestock performance. And then how do we make that data easier to access and utilise to help inform those decisions? So that's really the context around today. We also have Optiweigh and Black Box joining us at the Breed Forum being held at Wodonga on the 14th of May. So this is a really great snapshot for how we will, dig a bit deeper during that forum. Now, if anyone does have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Type them in as you go while you're thinking of your question. I'll facilitate a Q&A after Bill and Edwina have delivered their presentations. But really, we're here to listen to Bill and Edwina, so that's enough from me. I think Edwina's going to share her screen that'll have the slides on it, and I will pass over to Bill. And just thanks so much again, Bill, for joining us. Look forward to hearing your presentation today.
Thanks, Mick, and pleasure to be here with you all today. And really, we're really grateful to Heritage Australia for the work we've been doing with them, and just helping get what we're doing here and what we're doing with Black Box, for integrating the technology together out into the commercial world. So I'm just going to have a bit of a chat first about Optiweigh. I know some of you, I've seen a few names there, will be familiar with it, some may not, and then hand over to Edwina to talk about Black Box and how we're integrating our data with Black Box as well. So we might kick off into the Optiweigh section. Look, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Optiweigh, probably the next slide, Edwina, goes is the one to dwell on for a little bit. It's basically a little portable unit that gets towed into the paddock. It's fully self-contained. It'll sit there. We stick some sort of attractant in a tub inside the front of it. The animals put 2 feet on the platform to get at the attractant, and from that front feet weight, the breakthrough that we found and tested a lot of testing on in the sort of between 2014 and 2019 was that front feet weight is really reliable. We've proved it commercially, and it's been proven scientifically, and so we've spent the since about 2019 when we started some pretty prototypey sort of units. Just getting it into a commercial product that will withstand any sort of environment, can sit out there all year round and deliver reliable weight records. The sort of information that comes back is obviously, you know, what does the mob weigh, and how many animals are in certain weight categories, and then also information around average daily gains over different periods of time. As you can see, a little couple of screenshots from our app there. The system has a tag reader inside it, of course, so we also have all the individual animal data. There's a little app that gives summary mob information, and all the individual animal data is available on our website. You tow the unit into the paddock, really within a kind of generally between sort of 2 or 3 days and a week, you can have a pretty good indication of what the average weight of that mob of cattle is, and what the average daily gain has been since the last time that you saw it. I suppose the two important things are having an attractant in there that the animals like, and we find a loose lick works very well, and we actually make one that's very sweet, but people get good results, but it can vary with exactly what works on different places, different times of the year, and with different animals. But most commonly, it's something that's either sweet and molassesy, either a loose lick or a liquid or a block, or something salty. The trade-off is the more attractive it is, the more records you'll get, but the more often you'll have to fill up the tub. Generally, with a loose lick, we put a piece of plastic across the top of the tub with holes in it, so they've got to work at it. And generally, we find that, yeah, you put the thing out there, fill it up every kind of half a week or a week, and you get a pretty good idea of what the cattle are doing. In terms of getting accurate data, what we find is that most of the difference between if we weigh a mob in the paddock and we weigh them in the yards, and we get an average weight of the mob in the paddock, and then we take them into the yards, and if people do a back check, or they've got to come in to get drafted, the two main drivers of difference in weight are how are the animals handled between the paddock and the yards. So it's quite a full weight that's reported, and it assumes that the animals are pretty close to the yards, and they're weighed full, and it's designed to replicate that situation. But obviously, if they're mustered the day before and held in the yards, or they walked a long way to the yards, then there'll be a difference. But that difference is generally very repeatable. And the other thing to be a little bit careful of is that if you're trying to, the Optiweigh unit won't weigh the whole lot of the mob. Most common figure would be, about a third of the mob in half a week to a week. If there's a really massive spread of weights in the mob, like from 200 kilo animals to 500 or 600 kilo animals, then the individuals will be right, but the mob average may not be as representative as you'd like. But whenever we're under a 200 kilo or 250 kilo weight range, and we're getting those kind of 20 to 50 animals a day being weighed, which is pretty common, then it's a very reliable number. So that was a quick overview of Optiweigh. I suppose what I wanted to share a little bit was that what's been really interesting since we've had the units out and about is the things that people who've bought Optiweigh units have found in their systems that we kind of didn't ever really expect. We're building something to solve, and a lot of people will leave the units with the cattle for the whole time, and this is quite a good example of one that was kept with the cattle continuously. And although the green line's obviously just a chart of the average mob weight, and it's kind of a pretty healthy looking chart. I think the next slide, Edwina, shows us that although those weights had gone up quite well, when we looked closer, there were a couple of periods where the weight effectively went sideways for quite a period of time. And the fascinating thing about being where we sit is that we get the phone calls coming back in to say, oh, look, this Optiweigh chart says these cattle are losing weight, or they're not gaining weight like we expect them to. And the feed's good, and we think everything's right. And of course, it's a set of scales, so obviously we need to make sure they're right and do a bit of diagnosis. But it's happened a lot of times that we find situations like this. So we dug a bit deeper into this one, and this situation turned out to be a case of different pasture types and feed that was perhaps a bit rank. I think the cattle were being moved reasonably regularly. And so when we looked at these two flat spots, I think Edwin, on the next slide, the calculations were that in 60 days these animals they'd gained 60 kilos in 90 days, but there were flat spots there that equated to 30 days. So really, if it hadn't been for those flat spots, the cattle were doing a kilo a day, except for the time they got put onto the pastures that weren't as good as they expected them to be. And the amount of difference that made to the overall weight gain was stunning. It turned into a 50% productivity gain. And that's been the really interesting thing from where we've sat is just people learning about the drivers of weight gain. In this case, it was pasture type, but we've seen a situation. This is a situation where it was animal health. It was worms. These were cattle that were going backwards. They weren't supposed to be wormy. The weight chart was going down. They were on the phone to our support guys saying, well, what's going on here? And eventually we double checked the weights on the unit. Everything was right. And the vet was called, and the cattle, they actually called a vet because they'd been drenched and things, but they were actually wormy and needed treatment. And then the weights took off again. So we'll just flick forward again, and Buena. So what we found is people using their Optiweigh units, not just to know what's in the paddock and what's coming up and ready for sale and how many to book in, but really to understand what's driving weight gain in their animals. We've got this. We're up to about 700 units now. We've got a few units overseas, and we haven't. Measuring a sample of the mob has been a limitation in the stud setting. Certainly in a commercial environment, that getting a third of the mob has been adequate. It's been proven to be adequate. But what we've seen, I think there's a long way to go yet. But in terms of what we could do in a genetic environment, genetic evaluation, but there's a lot of things that are impacting weight gain, and it's been really interesting to see how getting information out of the paddock can improve our knowledge of what's driving weight gain, and I suppose getting that then linked in with all the other information through Black Box is creating even more opportunities. So I might go up there and hand over to Edwina and continue on from there.
Yep, thanks, Bill. And I'm sure Michael just posted in the chat, but if any of you have any questions along the way, feel free to just pop them in there, and we can either pull up along the way while it's fresh in your head, or we can answer them at the end as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Edwina. I'm client manager with Black Box Co. So I've been with Black Box for about 3 years now, and based down near Wagga on a property down here. Unfortunately, don't have too many Herefords around the place, but work with plenty of you that do. So as Bill mentioned, we have an integration with Optiweigh, where we bring these animals in using their paddock weights to tie in with the rest of the data. So those of you who are comparing, say, breeds or sires or paddock performance, you can get that real-time information from the paddock and tie it together with the rest of the data that you may be collecting crush side. So to take a step back, for those of you who aren't familiar with what Black Box is, and we're a little bit more than just pulling in the Optiweigh data. So we work with any crush side system that you're using to collect that on-farm information. And then further down the supply chain, we bring in information from feedlots and also abattoirs. So you might be familiar with kill sheets that you're receiving in Excel format. Some of you open them, look at the price at the bottom and close them. Others are diving into them in Excel and trying to link EIDs and things. So I guess Black Box came around as a solution to aggregating all of that data that you're getting from so many different sources. And a lot of you are making big investments into crush side software to collect more data, whether it's on your breeders, whether you're trading, growing out cattle right to kill, or if you're offloading them as feeders. So we're providing data back to you as a breeder or the grower from further down the supply chain, but also helping you make better decisions whilst those animals are still on property. So you can see here we work with a number of different crush side systems, as I mentioned, a number of different abattoirs. Some of these are more automated integrations. So for example, Optiweigh, you don't need to do a thing. You give us your client ID, Optiweigh authorizes it to come across to Black Box, and that updates every night. Others, it's a case of importing the data from your crush side system. So all of that data comes into what we call visual interactive dashboards. And like I said, we work right across the supply chain. So we're working with abattoirs, feedlots, and you as the producers. So you can select higher and lower performers in the breeding side of your business, or as weaners, or as I mentioned, if you're trading animals, working out where those higher performers are coming from. So I've included a few snippets here. I'm aware some of you are breeders, some of you have received feedback from Black Box before. So I'm not going to take you through all of our dashboards today because I'll give you death by dashboards. But what I will do is take you through a few examples of how some of our Hereford Australia members are currently using Black Box and what they seem to most like about it. So up the top of the first snippet that I've included is of some fertility data. So this is a small summary of our fertility dashboard of average weaning weights, preg test percentages, and weaning percentages. So again, that's all coming from the raw data that you collect crush side, whether they're pregnant or empty, or whether they're wet or dry, things like that. This marbling and MSA index information is coming back either from your abattoir or from your feedlot. So being able to actually select those higher performing animals, you can see here an example of making a selection on our dashboard and then tying it back to that on-farm data. So you might be recording breed, you might actually be recording right down to the sire or bull groups. You might want to compare by paddock, different mobs, classes, things like that. So pretty much all of that information that you're collecting will show in either bar charts or pie graphs that is all interacted. So you can make a selection and see the rest of the data change. So obviously really interesting to see the trends and correlations between different data points or different classes of animals. So as Michael mentioned at the beginning, we work right across the supply chain. So different reports are available in Black Box. Obviously, some of you won't be using breeding right through to feedlot and carcass, but there's a lot of different options there available to whatever suits your business. And for those of you who are starting to collect DNA data as well, we work with the likes of Neogen to bring that data in as well. So a few use cases that I'll run you through on our dashboards. They are much more exciting than my presentation, but what I thought I would highlight was lifetime traceability is obviously the biggest benefit, being able to link that end performance, even if you have sold those steers onto a feedlot, back to your genetics and on-farm management decisions is crucial and allows you to make better decisions down the track. As I mentioned, comparing on-farm data points with the like of Optiweigh paddock weight, so comparing ADG performance by sex, property, paddock, breeds, sale yards if you are buying in animals, classes, sires and dams. Obviously, some of you won't have all of that data, but that's the options that are there. And then another thing is some of our members are using our predicted weight summary, which I'll walk you through, working with their feedlots and abattoirs, planning when they might have cattle ready to sell. So using the Optiweigh ADG, they can input that figure into the predicted weights table and work out how many steers they might have or how many heifers they might have at a certain weight. That's another popular feature. So that's an example of this here, which I'll walk you through soon. But just a quick snippet of how that Optiweigh data is actually coming in. As I mentioned, it's comes in overnight. For those of you who are already using Black Box and Optiweigh, you would be familiar with that. And our dashboards show all of the historical information. So you can easily see your Optiweigh weights against your crush side weights. Which is important to understand the difference, as Bill was mentioning before, based on time of weigh and things like that. So what I'll do is I'm just going to share some dashboards with you. And as I mentioned before, feel free to ask any questions as we go. But can you see that dashboard there? Okay, Michael? Yep, all good. So some of you would be familiar with our feedback dashboards, but what I thought I'd start with was this is something that we've released beginning of last year with the feedlots, which allows them to provide data back to you as the breeder or the backgrounder. So number of head, induction and exit weight with carcass weight as well, and ADG. So as Michael mentioned at the beginning, it's really easy to select, say, your higher ADG animals with maybe your higher carcass weight or P8 fat, things like that. A lot of you I know are interested in the MSA index, which I haven't got showing on here, but you'll see here there's a number of charts that you can actually turn on and off to view what you'd actually like to see. So as I mentioned, it's all interactive. You can make a selection of time of induction and see how those animals have performed over time. Obviously, crucial if you're wanting to track the performance of your genetics and make sure that they're improving over time. Induction weight to make sure that you're targeting that ideal induction weight. So you can see the ones that might have been a bit heavier. So all of this data you can add to a list and then take, so these are the EIDs, it's in demo format at the moment, so it's all confidential, but you can take those EIDs and link it back to your on-farm data. So you then can compare it to that data that's coming from your crush side system of maybe what was their first weaning weight, exit weight, time spent growing on property, as well as ADG information. So again, you can compare breeds, or if you are using sire groups, things like that. So you can choose a particular sire, obviously scrambled demo information again. If you're breeding from different property of origins, this is all coming out of the NLAS database. So you can make a selection on those different picks to see how that data changes. Year of birth, so some of you might be interested in comparing, say, your 2021 steers compared to 2022's or last year's as well. And again, that's all information that's collected on farm, and you're actually utilizing it and turning it into insight on here. So as I mentioned before, our predicted weights table is on our growing management dashboard. So these are animals that are still currently on your property, and you can plan when they may be ready to sell based off their current ADG and weight performance. So similar to the last dashboard that we looked at, where you've got time growing and average weight gain at the moment. But you can come down here, and from your Optiweigh summary, you can see that they might be doing 0.8 a day. So you can update that predicted weights table and plan when those animals might be ready to exit. So that's our on-farm data. I just wanted to quickly show you an example of MSA data. So this is coming directly from your killed sheets. If you're sending to the likes of, say, Coles, Tees, JBS, wherever you're sending, it will give you information. So anything that usually comes back from the abattoir. So you may be able to select on, say, rib fat, carcass weights, pH, marbling, eye muscle area, things like that, fat color, dentition. So all of the things that you would usually get back from the abattoir. And our dashboards are really flexible, where you can drag things around based on the traits that you're mainly focused on. So you might want to really dive into eye muscle area, carcass weight, and let's say marbling, for example. So you can drag those to the top and focus on them, as well as break it down by breeds or different abattoirs or things that you're sending to. So I think that's a really quick overview, Michael, but as I mentioned, there's lots in there, and it's probably best to run through particular examples with those producers if you're interested in how it may fit to your business.
Thanks so much, Edwina, and to Bill. I mean, I guess when I look at this, you start looking at how do you identify those animals that have performed right at the top of an MSA index outcome? Who are the top weight gainers in the paddock? Are they also delivering the best carcass outcomes? And where did they come from? Who were those sires? What was the genetics that you started with to reach that? And how do we breed more of them? So I think about, it's great you used a feedlot example, Edwina, because they're measuring everything that they can every day. And yet in extensive systems, we really haven't been in that space. And there's a lot more precision I think we can get in extensive production. I guess, Bill, from your perspective, and even in your own business, I know when you're trading cattle, what are some of the big things that you look for that perhaps our members and breeders of cattle need to be aware of that really lead to better performance based on the data that you've seen?
Mick, I reckon the one that stands out to me from a breeding performance is actually not one that we see here so much in our climate, but in northern environments in particular, it's the impact of heat stress and the variability between animals in their response to that. So, and we see the heat stress. We see often the impact of climate on the weights, but it's the heat. It's when you get heat and humidity that it really kicks in. And it's been fascinating to see cattle lose weight when heat and humidity happens, and that not only in Northern Australia, but we saw it this summer right down into Victoria. But it's the individual responses to that are so amazing. In particular, one of the first time we noticed it was a mob of cattle, and they were in the north, and it was probably hot and humid, but they were Brahmins. And this mob of cattle lost 10% of their weight in a week. But within that, there were individuals who held their weight and individuals who lost 20%. So that's from a genetic perspective, I reckon there's some real opportunities there.
Yep. I think it was also interesting too, that you showed where cattle had some setbacks when, probably the pasture or the conditions actually looked quite good. And I guess the earlier you get that information, the earlier you can make some decisions about what you do, whether you supplement, whether you sell. You know, I guess there's some power in that information too.
Yeah, and the data's telling us that what might look good in the paddock is not necessarily doing the job that you expect. Sometimes it's doing better, and you get it the other way around too, where cattle are, the data says the cattle are steaming along, and they're not really expected to be, but they are. But usually we get the phone calls when it's the other way around.
Yep. And I guess Edwina, I was pleased with the list of the companies you're working with, because when you start looking at Optiweigh and getting carcass feedback data, we're working with a lot of those companies, including Stockbook as well, where we're having information feed forward. What's the best way for people to start exploring Black Box for themselves? And how should they, I guess, get in touch with you?
Yeah, so Michael, depending on the business again, but we always suggest for those who have carcass data, you have that data already. And I should mention, like, our subscriptions are based on different levels of dashboard usage. So, you can start off with the starter pack, which is carcass data alone, or just feedlot feedback alone. We always suggest that those that are getting feedback, you can easily combine your data on one dashboard at no cost. So that allows you to look at your feedback data alone over time, and every lot of new feedback that you get, you can get started there. But otherwise, my details are on the screen. Stockbook is really simple, where we pull a historical export across and all of your data is up on Black Box to get started. So obviously Stockbook's just one example that we work with. Gallagher, I mentioned, we have a direct API with, so we hook your Gallagher into Black Box and that data will come straight across automatically. So again, I guess it depends what data you have in your business, but a lot of you already have quite a lot that you haven't done much with in the past, or if you have done something with it, it's been time consuming and painful, working with multiple different sessions and trying to link sessions through EIDs and things like that. But we always suggest, if you've got carcass data or feedback data, get started there, and then we can also assist with the on-farm data collection. We do a lot of crush side support, where we help you set up templates on your systems to better optimize what data you actually are collecting and make it easier in the yards, so that you're not slowing things down in the yards. I know that's a huge concern most of the time. So we set up a few different data fields on your system, so that you only have to choose a drop down from, pregnant or empty. So the person crush side can't go typing in whatever they want, just to make that data consistent and accurate as well. So plenty of different options to start, but my details are on the screen if you want to reach out and just say, this is what I have got, or this is what I haven't got, and how would it work for me?
That's fantastic. Thanks, Edwina. There's so many sources of information as everyone here adopts more tech. There's more data, and packaging it up in one easy to access space is fantastic. I don't have any other questions in the chat. I expect that based off the back of this webinar, you'll have a lot of questions when we get down to Wodonga for the breed forum. And I hope to see everyone who's on this webinar and joined us today, or those watching the recording, join us at Wodonga, so you can catch up with Optiweigh and Black Box in person when we are at Wodonga at the Herefords Australia Breed Forum. So a big thank you again to Bill and Edwina. Thank you for your time today. We've really benefited from your expertise, and look forward to keeping in touch as your businesses evolve, and hopefully we can support you through our membership as well. So really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mick, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Mick, for organising.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.